Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Patrick Lyons, and I am here as I always am. Although last time we weren't. Welcome back, Patsy Feeman. You missed our last episode. You were on vacation. Good for you. Did you have a good time?
I had a fabulous time and good to be back. Thanks,
Good.
Patrick.
Well, we missed you, and we're glad you're here. And our other co-host, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, welcome back.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah,
I'm
great
a little
time
bit better, and my voice is a little bit stronger than last time.
Yeah, you get 4 stars for really pushing through. Last time we recorded, I knew that you weren't feeling well, but as I told you after the episode, the minute the lights went on, you just you were just a natural. So whether you were feeling well or not, the energy and the content was great. So just to catch up our listener, if you're tuning into this episode and you missed our last episode, you may want to pause this and go back and listen to that one and then come back, or at least listen to this one and then go back and make sure you catch up with episode 14, where we kicked off what we're calling a multi-part series on fixing bad organization culture. We addressed in that that first episode, there really is no such thing as good culture or bad culture. It's not ideal to label it. It just is what it is. But in that episode, we addressed what is culture, why it's important to you, and we talked about where do you begin in the process of improving your culture from whatever it is now to become a high-performance culture. So all of that is there. Today, we're going to switch now. We're going to actually continue that series, pick up where we left off, assuming that we've now baselined. That's where you start with your organization culture. If you're going to improve it, you start by baselining it. Start by gathering data so you can attack it just like you would attack any other business problem. So today, we're starting with the assumption that we've got data. We've sat down with you, our listener. We're assessing your organization, and we're looking at the data that we've collected. Now, Leb, one of the things that you said in our last episode that resonated with me then, it's to me a universal truth when you're talking about creating high-performance culture. You said that the data shows that leaders have the greatest impact on culture, right? That there are many inputs into culture, but leaders have the greatest impact in culture. We talked about that. It's also widely recognized that leaders are typically the ones that put together the vision and the mission for an organization. So, Leb, how does that leadership team create a vision that is compelling enough to create a great culture? Or how does the lack of a vision impact the organization culture? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, it is kind of a classic assumption that leaders are responsible for casting the vision for an organization. And sometimes even a leader is responsible. It makes me think of actually a previous episode with Carmen Bianco and Lori Ann Hoffman at New York City Transit, where a new leader comes in and recognizes here's a one of the largest public transit organizations, certainly in the country, if not in the world, and the vision seems stale in some way. He's unsettled by it, and that's Carmen Bianco. So one of the things I'd say is what we learned and what you'll hear from Carmen if you go back to that particular episode is it's hard work. It takes a lot of listening and a lot of engagement, and it certainly doesn't live just at the executive level. So it's not to be rushed, I think, was one of the things that Carmen learned. Like I'd like this done in 4 weeks. It's not necessarily going to happen in 4 weeks, but when you're talking about coming up with a vision that people will, in this case, it's kind of a revision, right? But when you're talking, and given the world that we're living in, that's something also. And as you have collected data, as you may find that your vision was good, it was great, maybe it was inspiring, and now we are 18 to 20 months into this wild world that we all live in, and it might need to be relooked at, recast, reworked. So how do you do that? And certainly engaging the leaders around you. Usually it's a leadership team, and starting to ask questions, have that conversation. And it is often, pass it back out to both of you, but it is often, I think, challenging to not try to operationalize what we're talking about, right? Because we're talking about culture. We're talking about a future picture that might inspire people that hasn't arrived yet. It's like the anticipation of, oh, I'm going to get something really great. I don't know exactly when I'm going to get it, but I'm going to get something really great. And it's motivating. It's inspiring. It's in some way something that keeps me, engaged or even on the edge of my seat. Kind of like the anticipation of the release of a great movie, maybe with your favorite actor and actress, or, your favorite director, or whatever the case may be. It's got to be like that. So not a simple task.
Yeah.
And I see that it requires a different set of skills and competencies. And most of us in our careers grow up through I got to get it done, more of the operational mindset. So then pausing long enough to look out to a new future, it requires a different set of skills, which a lot of people it doesn't come to us naturally.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good point. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think you're going to get it because you got an MBA necessarily, right? We don't teach some of this,
Right.
But when you look around at some of the people who have been good at casting a vision, whether you like the company or not, it's an important piece of the culture that leads to high performance, right?
Yeah. So the premise for this episode is we're sitting down with our listener. We're looking at the data that we've gathered on the culture, right? The inputs, the outputs of the culture, where there might be some strengths and where there might be some weaknesses. Let's assume for a moment that there are weaknesses, that there are opportunities. That the data came back and said, we're really not very strong in our mission. We're not very strong in our vision, in casting the vision. We're struggling with execution. What are some of the signs that, what are some of the, maybe a couple of questions. What are some of the questions you might ask the CEO? What are some of the signs that would indicate that we're not very strong in our vision, that maybe it's not exciting or inspiring enough, or it just doesn't exist at all? And then, well, let's stop there. What are some of the signs and what are some of the questions you might ask?
Well, I think a sign, and again, I'm going to refer back to New York City Transit and Carmen and Lorianne. I think one of the signs is you come in as a new executive and you ask people, "What's the vision here?" and they can't answer.
That's a pretty obvious sign, isn't it?
Or you get a whole lot of bits and pieces of maybe something that was cast a while ago.
Yeah.
And I think for the leader is, if I'm not inspired, how is the rest of the organization going to be inspired?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's another thing, is there's just kind of a litmus test around inspiration. And before you get into, is it achievable? Is it realistic? And all of those kind of things. And does it paint a picture? Does it cause me to kind of pause and go, wow, that I hadn't thought of that, maybe that's awesome. That's what we're looking for. So I think some of it is through just talking to your people. Yes, there's information on Glassdoor, places like that. Yes, there's information, but we're assuming we've gathered some of that information. And then I think the other sign is we're struggling in some way. Maybe we're struggling to execute, and we're 18 months into this pandemic, and it just doesn't seem to ring true anymore. or morale, seems flat. And it may be that our vision is needing some work, or our vision needs to be recast, or we don't know anymore. I mean, that's this whole back to office remote piece. People didn't have a vision for that. We weren't going to come back and go shoulder to shoulder, and all the conversations about we're going to lose teamwork, we're going to lose collaboration, we're going to lose, the vision isn't about what we're going to lose, right? The vision is about what we might gain together.
Right.
And is it inclusive? Might be another thing to take a look at.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the CEOs that we've worked with, where the vision wasn't perhaps as strong as it could be. I think you talk about that, people wondering, what are we doing here, right? Just that, how does what I do matter? I know it matters to me, it matters to my boss, but how does it fit into the bigger picture? Let me say it more in a positive than a negative. When people understand how what they do fits into a bigger picture that is accomplishing something greater than I can accomplish by myself. The sum is greater than the individual parts. When that's inspiring to me, that suggests that the vision is clear, it's strong, and it's known in the organization. Another symptom of an unclear vision that I can think of, situation that we addressed, that we worked with a client to fix, was they kind of had their hands in a bunch of different things, and it just divided the focus of the organization. As an organization, there are many things that you can do, right? There are many different ways you can generate revenue. There are many different needs that customers have. There are many different opportunities in the market, and you can potentially dabble in all of them. And when it divides your focus to the point where people are asking, well, what do we even do? Or when you're doing all of this, it's kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. When we've got our hands in so many different things and we're really not excelling in any of them, that can be a symptom of a watered down vision, or an unclear vision, or a lack of vision. Like we don't really know what we're supposed to be doing, so we're just going to do a little bit of everything, and that's problematic. And in some cases, the best thing to do, and we're speaking from experience here, the best thing to do is get out of some of those things that are really challenging your organization, because it doesn't align to what you're strong at. It doesn't align to your core purpose. Pare down and go deep into what you're good at, instead of trying to do many different things at once, only so.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It also reminds me, I think we talked a little bit last time about sports. That, when a head coaching job has changed, most of the headlines are, this coach has come in to change the culture.
Yep.
And, those who have a vision for what that might be and share it have proven to be more successful than those who have come in to, lay down the law, or, it's all about defense. Okay, that's good, but what's the vision? Right? That's more of a strategy or a tactic, right? To get after, we need to improve in defense. And it's happening right here in Portland, Oregon right now, right? But what is the vision that particular leader, that new head coach has?
Right.
So we'll see. But it also reminds me, of that as well. And, if it's dynamic enough, you're going to win the hearts and minds of the people, your players. And if it's not, we'll see. So, another piece that I think is really important in this whole kind of mission space is, let's say we have a pretty dynamic vision, a vibrant vision, a vision that people are excited about. Do we have a strategy in place that helps us move in the direction of that vision? Year after year, whatever it is, month after month, decade after decade, and that people understand and that people can respond to, and maybe ideally people had some input into, right? So I think there's also in that kind of mission space, there's this vision piece, and then there's this strategy piece. There's this strategic direction and intent that is also derived to some degree to help us realize our vision. And what I think we've talked about before, and we're all really fascinated by, is this notion of short cycle strategy, because we're living in a world where things are changing all the time.
Yep.
Right.
So is this a shift now? Is this the end of annual strategic planning, or is it a pause? But it's pretty hard to think that your strategy annually, when you couldn't predict the impact of the pandemic, you didn't even see the global supply chain issues that are so paramount right now impacting your business. So strategy is part of that conversation, and it's a part of does the culture have some strength, some strategic strength, as well as operational and tactical strength?
Yeah. And then out of that vision, out of that strategic plan, when it's communicated down into the entire organization, ideally everybody in the company then they have a piece of it, meaning something they're doing, whether it's their entire job or a piece of their job, or even maybe a small add-on to the day-to-day, is they're doing something to help move the needle on executing that strategic plan. That's how you get everybody in the company pulling together in the same direction. And you've talked about how the vision needs to be inspiring, and the strategy needs to be inspiring. And as a listener, you might be asking, well, why? Like, why? I mean, why? What is the importance of it being inspiring? And if you think, to me, inspiration is a necessary component to make me want to do the above and beyond to make it happen, right? When I'm inspired to get healthy, that's when I'm finally going to get off the couch and go to the gym, or that's when I'm finally going to change my diet, because I want it. When it's something that I know I should have, or it sounds good and it's probably good for me, but I'm not inspired by it, I'm not going to push through the hard things. I'm not going to overcome the obstacles that pop up. The minute an obstacle pops up, I'm just going to go, well, it was a good idea, but we can't because. But if I'm inspired, if I want that, those obstacles fall. So when the vision and the mission are inspiring, and then the strategy is attainable and something that I can grasp, and I understand how what I do contributes to executing that, and then within my work group, we can boil that down into tasks and whether you want to call them initiatives and rocks, or just tasks that I know when I do this, it's contributing to that, and that is contributing to the execution of the plan, and the execution of the plan is contributing to us getting to this mission, this inspiring vision. That's how you get people pulling in the same direction and excited to come to work, and so the outcome of that is an engaged workforce. But the input, the catalyst for it, was that leadership alignment, the creation of a compelling vision, and then breaking that into a strategy and creating the initiatives and rocks. And that's why the point of this part of the conversation is that That leadership team, the leaders and their ability to do that is a huge input into culture that typically leaders maybe heretofore haven't necessarily considered. They just think of, we talked about this last week, that they think culture is just engagement or culture is just the people. Culture really starts from the C-suite and emanates out.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it makes me also realize, like SpaceX, there's this vision. There was this vision to have civilians be able to taste what it's like to orbit the Earth and see what you see. And but what's cool about a vision when it's clear is it's not for everybody. There's a lot of people who are like, why are we wasting our money on, doing that when all these other things need to be done? But for some people, it's riveting, right? And whoever worked on that project, whatever engineers and mathematicians and all, and that's like, okay, if that gets you going, I'm sure you got going, and then when it successfully happens and lands, yeah, it's like that's a big deal. So what if that's not in place in your organization? There's no moonshot. There's no whatever. So that's what we're talking about.
Yes,
it has an impact on the culture. It's not just the people. And the other thing is you have there is a measurement, right? There's that book, Measure What Matters. There's people who recognized a long time ago that okay, got it. You got a vision, you got a strategy. Now, how are you going to execute on it? And culturally, when we look at goals and objectives, it's not just do they have them and are they measurable and appropriate. It's where do they come from? If I'm working there, did I have any input, or was I told, here are your goals and objectives for the year, go out and good luck and make it happen? That may tank the culture with a good vision and a good strategy.
Yeah.
Or if not tank it, kind of lower the level of enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. So that gets into a whole other thing about leaders have the greatest impact. So if they have the greatest impact, are they engaging with their people? Where did the information come from? Are they listeners? Go ahead, Patsy.
No, I was just
go ahead.
I was just thinking this one of our current clients has a real clear vision and mission, and yet and is scored high around the circumplex in most areas except goals and objectives. And there's starting to be a lot of discord in the middle managers in the company, the middle leaders, because they don't know where to go and they don't know how to direct their workforce. Mm-hmm. So often we talk about, are we clear? Are we aligned? Which is what Patrick was talking about a few minutes ago. Are we focused? If we don't have clear objectives, we're not going to be focused on the right things. So it will create a lot of discord. And eventually, your rocket won't take the right trajectory to go back to your SpaceX. But people really get excited about the vision, and then they get disappointed and disheartened by the lack of clear direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Patrick, when you talked about getting off the couch, mm-hmm. I remember going through a really hard time in my life, and I cast this vision that I was going to run a marathon. And it was, and that I wasn't going to run just like any old marathon. Right. And so it wound up taking me to Moscow, Russia in 1988, running the Moscow International Peace Marathon.
And if I'm not mistaken, you won quite the prize for that, didn't
you? I did. I met my wife running the marathon. My beautiful 30, we'll be 32 years together this June. Yes. But it wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to run a marathon. Here's, here, let me get a book. let's break it down into goals and objectives. I got to do this many miles by this week. And, it wasn't like that at all. It was all about this vision of running a marathon in some exotic marathon in some way that I didn't even know was possible. And everything that went along with it. And there was a strategy. You had to have a strategy, but you also had to meet some goals and objectives. But they were really related to the vision. And then that I was the last American to finish, and I won the biggest prize. So.
But you finished.
And I finished
in Russia.
It's great. So let's shift. We've now coached our listener. We've had the conversation about why your mission and vision scores might be low, right? If that's if that's what the data showed. Now let's shift into another important aspect, another component, and it's a large component of culture with many inputs that are, again, just like that vision, mission, goals, and objectives component it has inputs into the culture, meaning when things are working well, it's positively impacting the culture, and it is impacted by the culture, so that when the culture overall is not performing at a high level, then this area is impacted. And the area that we're talking about is kind of that foundational level of that foundational component of the company. The foundation, think of the foundation of we talked about this in our last episode. The foundation, think of it as you can't build a 3-story home on a 1-story foundation. So if you truly want to scale your business, you have to begin by scaling the foundation. Typically, when we're talking about the foundation, we're talking about at the core of that our values, core values. How will we treat each other? How is everyone expected to show up? And then taking it a level beyond just naming your core values, and doing the added step of then identifying 3 to 5, 5 to 7 behaviors that would bring that value to life here in our organization. So let's pause there. There are more components. There are more elements to that foundation component. But let's start with core values. Patsy, when you think about core values in an organization, what are some of the signs that maybe there's room for growth, room for development there, or what are some of the symptoms that maybe that's an opportunity, that's a place that's a place of the foundation we have to shore up?
Well, the first place I go is, how do we treat each other? How do I hold myself and you accountable for what I've agreed to do? So those are 2 areas. Accountability, am I living our core values? Do I even know how to live our core values? And then how am I treating you and my other colleagues? So that's one place I go to.
Yeah, I think accountability is a great one, because that you often hear that. You don't often hear a CEO say, we really don't do a good job with our core values. But what you do hear is, we seem to have an accountability problem here in the organization, right? We lack accountability, or this organization just not accountable. So listener, if you find yourself thinking about, when you hear that, if you find yourself thinking about aspects of your business where there's a lack of accountability, that could very well be tied to your core values.
Yeah.
And that could show up in terms of, recently I'm hearing more and more companies talk about the gossip or rumor mill. So gossip is a big one I'm hearing these days. And also blaming other people. Mm-hmm. Those are 2 components that I see are kind of starting to show up in the water cooler conversations.
Okay, so you mentioned gossip. I have to. There's just every time. No, gossip is one of those where gossip is an emotionally charged word, which means if I said to you, Patsy, you're being a gossip, like I would fully expect your defenses to shoot up, right? So we came up with a better word for it because gossip is like a dirty word. No one wants to be called, no one wants to admit that they're a gossip. The word we use for it instead is venting. I'm just venting. I just need to vent. I just need to get this off my chest, which really means I'm about to tell you just my side of the story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. And I'm probably going to speak disparagingly about someone or some organization. That's gossip. Gossip is speaking poorly about someone or something when the person you're talking to is neither part of the problem nor part of the solution. So if you find yourself venting, or if there's a lot of venting going on in the organization, and by the way, we all do it. I do it. We all do it. So when you find yourself venting, recognize that's just a better word, a sweeter word for gossip. And if you really want to if you want to create a high performance culture, then you eliminate the venting.
Yeah. But, the other thing, so we're going back to, signs about core values. If the core values, let's say there's 5 core values identified, and one of them is integrity. If there's no behavioral description of what it means to be living that value, it's pretty tricky for people.
Very tricky.
And it has to keep it alive. I mean, you have to keep talking about it, right? It's like, well, we could close, this multi-million-dollar deal, but, we're going to have to bend this and kind of, pretend that's not there. And okay, people watch, people observe, people recognize, right? Your people recognize and observe it, which again goes back to maybe leaders do have a bigger impact on the culture than they realize. But I want to know if it's a core value around integrity, what does that look like for me? Right.
In this organization, in our organization. Yeah.
And integrity might also include, I'm not going to talk disparagingly about other people.
Right.
Because I should go direct if I have a problem with somebody.
Yep.
Right.
You have a phrase for that. What is that phrase?
It's go direct.
What I'm thinking of is go direct, be direct,
Mm-hmm.
and redirect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's your phrase, not mine. So can you explain, what do you mean when you tell a CEO or a CEO's team or an organization, go direct, be direct, redirect? What do you mean?
Well, let me use an example. So I'm working in a tech company that's about to go public. So they're being successful. And the CEO and I are talking, and he's saying, we got one creeping vine, weed-like problem that's starting to really bother me, and I think it's dangerous. And it's that people are coming to me to talk about other people more and more and more, and I'm not quite sure how to handle it. So that's where actually this whole thing came from. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm listening, I'm offering some coaching, and I'm giving them ways that they might go back to talk to that person or address that with maybe someone's team. I'm like, okay, and how's that working for you? He goes, I'm still getting more and more people coming into my office, So I said, okay, well, what if you stopped listening to all that and let it be known that consistent with, our value of integrity, if you are having a problem with someone else, I want us to go direct. And I want us to be direct. And only come back to me, this was the redirect, both of you, if you need some help to get further along with whatever it is that you've been troubled by. And so they adopted this phrase of go direct, be direct, redirect. And if you think of that in terms of the traffic into his office, it dropped significantly because nobody really wanted to go back and say, oh, we really couldn't work this out, but sometimes that was the right thing to do. But it changed the culture. I mean, it was really cool to watch. It
Yeah.
changed the culture. The culture became much more honest, much more much happier. That kind of behavior really didn't generate happiness and good energy. So we started noticing that there was more laughter. So I mean, again, this is a signal. Are you hearing laughter?
Yeah.
Are you hearing gossip more than you're hearing laughter? I mean, there are ways to get
Yep.
there are indicators, right?
Yeah.
And you want to pick up on those indicators.
Yep. Okay, so we've talked about core values. What other, if we're coaching our listener and we're looking at low culture scores specifically in the areas of foundation, we've covered core values. What other aspects make up the foundation, and what are some symptoms that there would be trouble there?
I think we hear a lot with the clients that we work with that somewhere in the mix, decision making is not clear.
Mm.
And so, the notion, or we hear, well, we're ready to go, but the leadership team just can't come to agreement. So everything's stalled or on hold. And I think it's pretty foundational, and you recognize it when you're working in an organization, especially as consultant, like what we do, and you recognize whether decision making is being made at every level and whether it's clear or not, and whether any group, any department, but let's start at the top. If things get stuck at the leadership team level, or decisions don't get made kind of chronically, they're not clear and aligned. There's work to be done. They haven't done the go direct, be direct, redirect route.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's what, they ask us to help them with. But so I think it's very foundational that there's some understanding about decision making and at every level, and not getting, look at the United States, not getting filibustered,
right,
to the point that a key decisions they just can't get made. That could really hurt any culture.
Mhm.
That's very disheartening to every employee.
Right. Or if decisions made, you left a meeting, the decision's been made, and the next day the decision's unmade.
Right.
Because somebody came into the later on and argued their point of view, or whatever, and we're back to that. Those kind of things can really erode the foundation of a good culture.
Yeah.
So that comes to mind for me. I think it's pretty foundational, pretty important.
Patsy, what do you think from issues in the cracks in the foundation, other than the core values piece? What comes to mind for you and some of the work that you've done?
Well, I see even teams that work together well as a team also have to work with other teams or other departments.
Yes.
So it's like, how do I work with you? And even though our team purpose may be different, or it's sometimes at odds even, but how do we understand the cross-disciplinary or cross-departmental workings? I see that happens, especially as companies scale and grow. We're used to 50-person company, and now we're like 100 or 120, and we're departmentalized. And
yes,
so that's one thing I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Silos. That's the word that came to mind.
Yeah.
If I see silos in my organization, and that's not a new point, it's reinforcing the one you just made. If silos have developed in the organization, it's often a symptom or indicative of foundational issues that the more you scale, the more that will impede your ability to be successful, meet customer needs, keep employees happy. So again, that's one, again, that's an input into culture. It's kind of reinforce that point. All of these are inputs into culture, because if silos form in the organization and are left unchecked, then often you see competing priorities. You see battle lines drawn in the organization where people are choosing sides. That's going to divide the culture. Whereas that leadership component that we started talking about today with, if leadership is aligned at the top and communicating down into the organization, into that next level of leaders. And Patsy, I want to come back to you on that next level leaders in a second. But if they're driving that message down to the next level of leaders, that we work as a team at all levels, we work across functional boundaries, we collaborate, we share information, we, where there are competing priorities, we come together, we discuss it, and we figure out how to create win-wins. That's an input from the culture, in that sense, the leadership aspect, the leadership input into culture, then impacts the foundation. So it's a two-way impact. Now, the reason every time I say next level leaders, Patsy, I feel like I need to come to you for input, because I know that's your passion, right? Talk about the impact of next level leaders on culture, the importance of developing them, and how that's considered part of the foundation.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, most of us enter into an organization having some skill set. So we're an individual contributor. And then because we are acknowledged for working well with others, we become a high functioning team member, and then we're a team leader. And then all of a sudden, it's like we're faced with leading 2 or 3 teams. And then at some point, I was talking to somebody earlier today, we're being asked for our input on strategy or to look out for the company wide. But most mid-level leaders, which is your next level of leader, aren't provided with the skills or the awareness that I'm needing to hold both of those places. I call it kind of the knuckle in the organization. So I still have to do we've been talking about the difference between operations and strategy. So I'm still responsible for the daily operations. It's those objectives. But now I'm being asked to contribute more to looking out and bringing up through the people I work with that wisdom to inform leadership. So it's a communication up and down, but it's an additional new set of skills and behaviors that's needed for that next level of leader. And I would say, 75% of people don't. It's a real challenge to start to think strategically. It's not part of our core skills.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's so true.
And yet they're being asked to do that, and they're just like, that transportation program we just worked on, Leb. I'm being asked to think strategically, but what in the heck does that mean?
Right.
Right. No one's ever really given me much about strategic thinking.
Right.
Yeah. So often, I'm sure we've talked about this in other episodes. So often, we identify our top individual contributors. That's why they get promoted to leadership, because they're great individual contributors. And it's it's the old adage, what got you here won't get you there. And so we put them in these roles. And this is, I think, where this is a mistake that a lot of companies make. We put them into roles, and we know that they need leadership training. So we might put them in something called like a manager 101 training, which is often maybe at worst 3 hours, maybe like a half-day course. At best, it might be 2 to 5 days of manager 101 training. And then we check the box and we send them back to their desks thinking they're fully equipped for everything that's going to come at them as new leaders. And they're not. And without that ongoing mentoring and support, the first time, and it's not that what we've taught them in that class isn't good. I'm sure a lot of it is good. It's just the practical application of it becomes challenging when I'm faced with a performance issue, or when I'm faced with an accountability issue, or I'm faced with competing priorities that I have versus another team has. And how do I take all that classroom knowledge and apply it? And that's where many organizations fall short. It's that ongoing coaching and mentoring and developing. It's think of leadership development as a never-ending process. We should always be supporting and growing our leaders because they're the knuckle in the organization. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Leb and I were privileged to hear the CEO of a regional transportation company speak this summer, and she said, you have to let go of who you've known yourself to be in order to create the space for who you want to be next, who you're committed to being next. And I think there was an audible gasp in the room. Reminds me of what you're
writing notes, really.
Exactly.
That's great.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. Leb, do you have any other thoughts on the foundation? What makes it
Well,
up?
the only other thought I have, again, for our listeners is that, it takes me a little bit back to the core values. So, we worked, this occurred in a state agency and it occurred in this large transportation industry piece that we did. The whole notion of information is power. You can get confused depending. Let's say you have a core value that includes collaboration and another core value that includes competition or winning. It can get confusing.
Right.
And we literally would see departments that would withhold information intentionally to win. When you see it, when you see it on a sports team, it's the individual who's paying really close attention to their individual stats, and that is number one. And whether the team wins or not is number two, right? And vice versa. So again, I think it's always good to take a look at the core values, take a look at the descriptions that might help people understand what's the intent behind the core value, and recognize that more clear and aligned the leadership team is certainly helps, but also the more clear and aligned everybody in the organization is around some key elements like the vision, like the strategy. They've had input into the goals and objectives. They know what they're doing makes a difference. This core values foundational piece, or everything we've been talking about there, I know what decisions I can make or I can't make. They're all impacting the culture.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So let's, in a moment, we'll come to kind of the end of this section. And it's a little teaser to our listener. In our next episode, we're going to cover two more significant components of your business. Today, we covered that C-suite leadership component, and we've covered that business foundational component. When we meet again in the next part of this series, Fixing Bad Culture, we're going to talk about the people component, and then we'll talk about the what is sometimes considered the externally facing component. It's our ability as an organization to be flexible and adaptable. Two more significant components of your organization that impact the culture and are impacted by the culture, by those other components. So we'll do that. And we're going to end today, as we usually do, with the let's get practical. I'll give you guys a moment to kind of get your thoughts together. I want to share a brief update on 2 episodes ago. We had Doug Locker and Terry Johnson, partners from Fellner & Kuhn, on. They were talking about the work that they have done as an organization over the last 5 to 6 years to create a high-performing culture. In between that episode and today, they just hired a new accountant. They have a new person joining their team. And Terry texted me the other day to say she was very happy. She said this new candidate that they offered the job to accepted the offer and said she had other companies she was interviewing with and expected other offers, but she chose Fellner & Kuhn specifically because of the culture. So if you, the listener, are trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why do I care about this? What's the point? My response back to Terry was, congratulations. That makes you an employer of choice. And that's right. You read that. Oh, how do you become an employer of choice? It's not, they didn't offer the most money. They may not necessarily have even offered the biggest career path, but culture really does matter. It really makes, it's a huge component of being an employer of choice. So with that, let's I just wanted to give that update because I was excited for them.
That's great.
Yes, terrific.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Really good.
So, all right, let's, as we usually do, let's talk about key points, key takeaways from this episode, from our conversation today, that our listener can begin implementing tomorrow to try to make inroads in not fixing bad culture, but certainly becoming a high performance culture. So who'd like to start? I'll save mine for the end.
Oh, okay. Patsy, you want to
Sure.
share first? Okay.
Creating a compelling vision it's hard work. It takes time. It takes focus, and it takes listening. That's when I'm walking around. And especially, and don't take your vision for granted. Every year, in normal years, but especially in a pandemic year, pause, reflect on your vision, see if it's still relevant. Does it need a refresh? Don't take it for granted. Then for you, the listeners, the CEOs, ask yourself, as a leader, am I inspired? And do I inspire others? And how would I know? I love your question, Patrick. How would you know? What are the telltale signs?
That's great.
And then one that I'm always fond of, what kind of summarizes, are we as an organization clear on our direction, aligned in our resources, focused on what's most important, and accountable for our actions? So those are mine.
Those are hard questions.
Oh, did we promise this session was going to be easy? Oh, no. No, I don't think we did.
No, that's great stuff, though. Thank you. Leb, what did you have?
Well, I think, Patsy covered some really great points on, let's get practical on the vision. Especially resonates for me is that if I'm not inspired by it, then how can I expect others to be inspired by it? So I'm doing a personal check there. I think, in terms, you have to have a strategy that will help you over time realize the vision. And so I'd say, let's get practical about strategy. We know that we have often been called in to facilitate strategic planning that is really basically an operational review plus 8% more of this or 10% more or 3% less of that. That's not what we're talking about. So, I think it's grasping what being strategic really is. I think it's a practical thing to help your people understand what strategic thinking is in whatever way you can. I mean, there are TED Talks, there are good resources, and you can do that amongst yourselves. So I think that's really important. When people understand the strategic direction and how it helps, relates to the vision, and making those connections, I think is really important. And Patsy brought up about the vision. We're in unprecedented, I don't like the word unprecedented, but we're in a pandemic and we have things happening all over the globe that are impacting businesses and people all over the world. So I think, along with that, your people are going to deliver. They're bringing the culture to life. And it raises another question for me is there a strategy around caring for your people? Because people are going through all kinds of things. And, on a steep learning curve, or trying to work with, people at home, or, all of the things that we know we're all going through, or, you've just sold a big job and now you found out that the supplies aren't available. And it's disheartening. So I think there's a strategy to stay, especially for CEOs and leaders, to stay really connected to and listening to your people. That is just as important as the strategic plan for delivering the vision and guiding the activity of the company.
I'm gonna add a footnote as you're thinking about what the next one. I'm seeing more and more CEOs that are saying one of the core competencies they need from their employees, from their people, is empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. The only other thing I'll add in terms of goals and objectives is the best cultures we have the opportunity to work in or help work on recognize that people want some input into their goals and objectives. And so while the culture of the day might have been to cast them from the top down, I don't know that works very well anymore. So I'd say let's get practical, check on where the inputs come from. And it's similar to the vision. The more you get your people involved in the vision, the more they're going to accept and believe and get excited. Yeah. It's kind of like that with strategy, and it's kind of like that with goals and objectives as well. So yeah. I guess I'll say get people involved in all of it.
That's great input from both of you. And we had overlap, so I love it. What I will add, Patsy, you brought this up. So you, the listener, the CEO, recognize that accountability issues are often symptoms of lack of belief in or adherence to the core values. Just lack of living and leading those values can manifest itself as accountability issues. Go direct, be direct, redirect. I guess I'm surprised it took episode 15 for that to come up, because it's just such great advice. Such great advice. So as a CEO, I'd love to see you implement, first of all, practice it yourself. Go direct, be direct, redirect, and then begin to implement that down into your organization. Because venting is the same as gossip, and both of them are culture killers. Decision-making should be thought of, should be considered as part of the foundation of your business. So think about, how do we make decisions? Are we collaborative? Is it top down? Is it do we have the right people at the table? Is it a dictatorship? That decision-making process is an input into your culture, and so pay attention to that. Silos, that's a big one. Silos are also often they're indicative of foundation issues that can be broken down. That can be. It has to be communicated from the top. But silos, if you've got silos in the organization, that's often indicative of that is impacting your culture, and it's indicative of larger issues. And then finally, as leaders, remember you have this knuckle down in the organization. You've got these next level of leaders who are critical to the delivery of your vision, the communication of your strategy, and the execution of it. And so make sure they are equipped, make sure they are supported, because if you get that right, that's a significant impact to the culture. If you get it wrong, that's also a significant impact to the culture. So you might as well get it right. I think that's what I have. Just a lot of great points. I love working with both of you, because you both bring so much to the table and you make this fun and easy. And I hope the listener found it useful as well. So thoughts, comments, anything else before we sign off?
I'm going to offer a bonus to our Let's Get Practical. And that is a 1 or 2 page on how do we start thinking strategically. So I will add that to our landing page as kind of a bonus for today.
Excellent. There you go. All right. So listener, head out to thefrustratedceo.com, where you can not only find this episode and all of our episodes, but every episode comes with it this Let's Get Practical. It's a downloadable PDF. It's the key points from the conversation. And it sounds like today's episode will have this added bonus of how to begin thinking strategically. So if you're curious about what that means, how it's different from a tactical or an operations meeting, operations review like Leb was suggesting, then definitely download this one. It's a free download, and all of the Let's Get Practicals are there for you. So I think that's it. Thanks so much for sticking with us for another episode, and be sure to go back and listen to the first one if you missed it, so you understand what is culture, why is it important, and how do you begin to build a high performance culture. And then that helps support today. And then make sure you come back for the next episode, where we'll talk about those other two major inputs into your organization culture, just to help you understand that culture is bigger than just the people. It's bigger than just engagement. We appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the content, make sure you like it and share it. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think. Let us know future episode topics. We'll make sure to cover that. And I guess that's it. Signing off. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Leb.
Thank you.